Hello and welcome to another Scratchcast interview. This time we're here with folk and blues singer-songwriter Tastik, ahead of the release of his new single Hangman, which is due out in a few days' time on Friday, the 12th of February, 2021. So first off, a big thank you to VT for joining us. I don't know if I can call you VT or
Go for it. You can call me whatever it is as long as it's not son or asshole. But I prefer Van or VT. Those are my two favorites.
Awesome. Well, we're both pretty stoked to be talking to you. So yeah, thanks for agreeing to do this.
No worries. Thanks for having me. This has been a while since I've been in an interview with anyone who reviews music. So,
well, this is only our second one, so we're still a bit. It's still a bit of an unknown quantity for us, so but it should be fun anyway. So I think just to start off, if I can just ask you to give us a little bit of an introduction to Tastik, you know, who you are and sort of how you would describe your music.
Recently I've realized that I probably fall in the category of dark blues and dark country. So that's usually how I describe myself. Originally, way back when I was starting off with this particular act of VT in Edinburgh, I called it Dark Delta Blues, and I gravitated away from that, and now I'm slowly gravitating back because I'm secretly a goth, and I've decided to let the whole world know I'm out of the goth closet now. I'm out of the coffin. Ready for everyone to see and find out. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would call it. There's another term that I like, which is Southern Gothic. I'm not actually from a really Southern state. I mean, yes, but no. Virginia is like on the cusp. That's where the line between Confederates and the smart ones was. And I was on the north side of that line, thankfully, but that doesn't mean that, it isn't technically a Southern state, I guess.
Cool, man. Well, we've read online, as you said, that you were kind of born in Virginia, and you've described your life as, well, you were born into somewhat of a kind of nomadic family with a dark past, and that you've kind of busked all over Europe. So presumably traveling or moving from one place to the next and everything that entails has always been part of your psyche, or rather who you are as a person. How do you think that's influenced your music and style over the years?
That's a good question. I think it's made me gravitate towards understanding the past, not only my own, but the past of our planet, our world, I guess. Whether obviously more European civilizations, because I'm just different shades of dairy, but basically an interest / obsession with the historical. I on my stiff jobs, I worked all sorts of stuff that was related to history or related to somehow acting, because that's another one of my great passions. Right. And so that's kind of where all of this comes from. I'd say that in my music, I still have a very American aspect to it. Obviously, I can't shake this accent no matter how hard I try. Although there's this influence of my youth from all of the sort of American folk music, ranging from the early African American spirituals and work songs, all the way to the more modern like hill country and Chicago blues type stuff, and everything that has been like a rehash of that throughout the more recent decades. I think that I have maybe taken a little bit from Scottish culture, for example, where I lived for quite a while. I took a little bit from British, like English culture, because I was around a lot of people who were into sort of, I guess you would say, medieval music. Like I was based in Oxford for a long time, and there was a lot of people who were interested in like Tudor chamber music and pre-Raphaelite music and stuff like that. So a lot of strange scales that we're not used to these days, and an understanding that it all sort of doesn't, it's relative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like our perception of scales today was not our perception of music, and what is musical today is not the perception of our people 800 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, where they had a completely different idea of how to sing a song and how to build a song. So I suppose that what it actually made me do is look to the past, where there was a steady, constant information flow and a culture that I could identify with somehow amidst all of these different changes of culture and settings.
Okay, cool. Have you found that some countries have been more receptive to your music than others?
Yeah, for sure. I've done all sorts of music over the years with this specific project of VT and me as, the Reverend Van. I found Scotland was extremely receptive. You guys are always up for a good sing-along, so that worked very well. The Irish that I have met, I've never played in Ireland, unfortunately, but have also said very much the same thing, that's very much from their culture too, which is something that we took in the States as well. So we have a lot of sort of standy-uppy, singy, out of nowhere background in the US. We'll just sort of stand up and sing an old whatever hymn or something. And the Irish and the Scottish, you guys have that same sort of storytelling type singing culture. Yeah. So the US, North America in general have been super receptive as well. And South America, very unexpectedly, actually very receptive. Basically, a lot of the English speaking cultures that I've played in, that might also have to do with my texts, I guess. But I'm building up the catalog of releases that I have, and I'm seeing that as it's developing. I'm getting places crop up like Russia. The Russians seem to love me, which I did not see coming. And so do the Romanians and the Argentinians. So there's a bunch of cultures in there that really kind of surprised me, but I like that.
What's been your favorite place to play?
I miss Edinburgh. I really, really, really miss Edinburgh. I used to play on a weekly basis in a place called the Doghouse, which is still on somehow on its feet. I don't know how they're doing it, but shout out to all of my mates who still work there. The Doghouse were some very, very good people, and it was always a good time playing there because I could basically do whatever the crap I wanted. Can I curse? Is that okay?
Yeah, you're
okay.
Scots, of course you can curse.
Okay, cool. Whatever the shitty tit fucks I wanted to do, I did. So I got up on their bar and shouted, belted, the lines of an old spiritual or something like that, and there was never really any qualm with that. And then maybe I had a really good reception in Germany too. I played in a bunch of art co-ops and just sort of like did an impromptu gig because I knew people who worked in them, and it was like, well, my mate's here with a guitar and he's all right or whatever. So I got up and played and people really enjoyed it. So yeah, I would say Germany and Scotland so far. New Zealand was a very good reception as well. I did a few gigs there, and I had a lot more fans there who showed up than I would have expected. But I've not been back since, thanks to Madame COVID and her wonders.
You just mentioned Germany there, VT. Is that where you joined the Green River Burial?
Yes. My God. Yes, I did. I was with them for like 4 rehearsals and 1 gig.
All right. Okay.
It was an extremely short-lived thing. I was with a bunch of other hardcore bands or like any like post-hardcore type of bands throughout that, my time in Germany. But the Green River Burial went on to be a pretty big deal pretty much immediately after I left the country. And I have been kicking myself in the shins ever since. They did amazing. And I was really proud to, know them and have them as friends. But yeah, I wanted to go off and study, and I didn't feel like I could do that in Germany at the time.
Right. Okay.
So I went with the UK.
Do you see yourself including more of that type of thing in your future projects, or is that something that we can expect from your upcoming album?
If on my upcoming album, not so much. I think people will always be able to sort of like sense, there's like a whiff of metal in what I do. If nothing else, just purely by the DIY approach that I have to a lot of what I do. This suitcase here as a kick drum. Most of my early stickers I would make myself, sort of that kind of stuff. I would say if it were to come, I would probably expect it to show up in other projects that I may or may not already have going, where drummers and other musicians are involved, and I can get heavy and do a little crowd surf or stomp on some heads, as in that. No, that's walk on the head walk. There we go. Jesus, goddamn, yeah, that kind of fun stuff. Jump into the mosh pit, but it's not. I've embraced the darkness of VT with this coming album and realized that I was sort of denying myself that for a while. So there's going to be a little more darkness in what I do, like a little more eerie sounds, I guess, and stuff like that, but you will already hear quite a bit of that in my album coming up.
Is that something you're still actively involved in, then, playing with other bands and artists, or is it just kind of VT that you're focused on at the moment, or is that something you might do kind of in the future as well?
At the moment, it's really just VT. There are side projects that every so often I'll go and hang out with a friend who's a drummer or a friend who's a bassist or whatever, and we'll come up with stuff. But most of these people are, because of my tendency to travel all over the place, sort of scattered to the four corners of the earth.
Right. So
yeah, not in the next few years, I would say. But I also like to dabble in every genre. So I've worked on some hip hop with some friends. I don't see genres as defining. I think so much as the style in which you do that, or the message which is behind it, I guess.
Yeah, I think definitely some of the best music comes when those genres completely overlap and you can't really tell, what it's supposed to be, and it's something entirely different. That's when music can be at its most exciting. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So kind of our first introduction to your music was, well, at least mine was from when we reviewed Ain't No Man with Money on the podcast, which is a kind of, it's got that sort of lo-fi, crusty folk and blues sound, which is right up my street. And it's got quite a simple music video. It's almost like a travel diary, but it ends with this kind of gruesome picture of your bloodied face. What's the story behind that image and that song as well?
So I wrote the song when I was in a massive financial rut. And I was looking at and watching a lot of old blues videos as well. And specifically, one of my favorite artists who plays very much in that style that I was playing is called R.L. Burnside. And he was from the Fat Possum crew. So Junior Kimbrough, Model T Ford, and a lot of guys who are from the sort of same area as I'm from. Like the Appalachian Mountains, basically. So I was watching these videos and going, man, I see this and I feel this. And I just sort of started writing, semi-inspired by me and semi-inspired by these videos of R.L. Burnside sitting on his porch with like 25 children and grandchildren, and they're playing the other instruments and he's playing a guitar and singing. And the cause for all of that lack of money and lack of work was actually because I had a gigantic piece of metal go through my face here all the way up to here when I was cycling in the Netherlands. And it was late at night and I was tired, and I'd come home from a long shift at the bar I was working, and someone nudged me and I was cycling without my hands. And one thing led to the next, and I sort of called the hospital incapable of speaking for myself because I just sounded like a slurring drunk. And the woman, it was about to hang up on me, and one of the people who lived around there like came out and said, "Hey, this dude is actually bleeding quite a bit." So I ended up at the hospital, and I've got around 10, 11 stitches here. But yeah, so that was actually sort of part of my experiences so far in the Netherlands as well, and what led to writing that song or finishing that song.
Cool. Okay. I mean, there's stuff in the song about kind of throwing off your material possessions and finding enjoyment in the sort of important things in life, friends and family, that kind of thing. Is there anything that, if you were to kind of throw all your stuff away, is there any one thing that you couldn't go without? One thing that stayed with you throughout the course of all your travels?
Any given musical instrument pretty much would be the hardest thing for me to part with. I had an upright piano in my last place, which just came with the house basically. And we had to leave it there. We had to sell it off actually, because the guys moving in didn't want it, and we couldn't keep it. So and that was a heartbreaker, because I love any sort of musical instrument. But I think I also really like all of my sort of these type of secondhand vintage finds that I spend my life looking for. Like this morning jacket, or these morning pants that I wear, or this hat, which is a hand-me-down from an old place I used to work at. But yeah, I think those would be the hardest things for me to give away, because these aren't things that I bought from a store as such. It's like the rare lucky find in the one vintage place that you did not expect to find this hidden treasure. So yeah, those would be the hard things for me to part with. And maybe my computer, which has been my best friend for all of things editing and music recording related. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get a chance? Well, I imagine you probably did go to the Armstrong vintage store in Edinburgh.
That's where I got this.
Nice.
I think I might have gotten these morning trousers as well from the Armstrongs, but I don't remember which one, mind you. Yeah, Armstrongs are an amazing place. I went there all the time. But there's a bunch of unsung heroes around Edinburgh as well that sell some amazing stuff that people don't really go to as much. And usually those are actual charity shops rather than vintage. And I have to say, if given the choice, I prefer to shop in charity, simply because of why it's there and what they do. But generally speaking, I source most of my clothes secondhand. I don't buy my shirts secondhand, or some of my ties or whatever, socks and underpants. But a lot of my wardrobe is bought secondhand, which is also why in my lyrics in Ain't No Man with Money, I talk about how been handed down all of my things, which is very much actually true. And all of the fancy rings that I wear as well, like that's all found in what's the word? Flea markets or, vintage fairs or stuff like that. I rarely buy them new.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Obviously, VT, you mentioned your computer there, and you've kind of relied on that quite heavily recently, what with everything kind of going on to do editing. And obviously, you've got the Church of Fantastic live stream that you do every Thursday.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about how COVID has affected you and your art and how that outlet has helped you through?
Sure thing. I think for starters, it has really forced me to reconsider the way that I interact with the other side of the camera, and forced me to find creative and otherwise maybe unexplored ways to interact with my audience and my fans. Because, in Edinburgh, a lot of what I did was very much live gigs, and Edinburgh has very much a live gig culture, same as really a large part of the UK. It's very much, there's live music in the pubs in the evenings and stuff like that, and it doesn't really change. What's harder is figuring out a way to really live off of your own music, and making that sustainable. And I think that's where COVID has pushed me, because I sort of drifted away from music quite a bit upon moving to the Netherlands. And I moved here as a result of everything that was happening post-Brexit in the UK. And just the uncertainty of what that meant for me as a self-employed non-British person, or Scottish. But I think interacting with people, maybe trying harder to interact with people on a virtual level, and coming up with ideas like the Church of Fantastic, because that was actually what my nights at the Doghouse in Edinburgh on South Clark, or was it Nicholson? That long street that goes from the South Bridge. That's what they ended up being called. So it was sort of an allusion as well to what I used to do in Edinburgh, and how much of a community that became. So I would say that it has forced me to focus more inwards, and on how I want to present myself to the audiences at large.
Cool, man. So, as you're kind of well aware, probably, in the UK, the government support for musicians and artists has been laughable, to say the very least. With the Chancellor basically telling people to retrain and find new jobs. How has the support in the Netherlands been compared to the UK, or has it been pretty much just as bad or non-existent?
I have to say, support for artists, I don't know that there's been much.
Right.
There is a better infrastructure in general in the Netherlands when it comes to those sorts of things. The Dutch are more socially oriented than the Westminster government. That's not to say anything about the Scottish government, because generally my experience with Scotland on a political level is that it's a lot more socialist, or a lot more socially minded than the south of the UK. So I would say, as far as I know, and to be very honest, at the start of the pandemic, I still was on furlough / had a job. There wasn't much support for artists, but there was quite a bit of support for independent businesses.
Right. Okay.
So people who fell under the category of self-employed. And I think that a lot of musicians here, you would find, were classified themselves as self-employed, and were registered and thoroughly engaged in everything that involved, But for me, it hadn't been something that I was doing on a very regular basis. So I didn't really get into that too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, how do you think the best way for people to support musicians and artists is at the moment?
That's tricky. It really depends on the artist and what their suggestions of support are, you know. I think that maybe I would say even just like for people who are out of a job and people who don't have anything going for them financially speaking right now, just being on social media and retweeting, reposting, sharing, liking, commenting, tagging your pals or whatever in an artist's posts that you really like is so amazingly helpful already, because it forces you out of the reach of the sort of limited few that you have, and puts you in front of the eyes of, you know, more and more people as the sort of graph goes down and it splits here and splits there, and you know what, 5 people tag 2 friends and then they tag 2 friends, and before you know it, you've got an easy 100 new fans or whatever. So that's amazing. I have a bunch of friends who have the same thing that you guys have, the buy me a coffee thing. That's pretty helpful from what I understand. There's a system of PayPal donations, which I've started on my Spotify. But people aren't super able or willing to give at the moment because it's not exactly a thriving time for most. So I think on a super easy, very ground level, just religiously share, comment, like, post, and repost everything that your favorite bands do, because that gets them in front of others. And if they have any kind of merchandise, or if they're offering any kind of like subscription services to something that enables you to get like more in-depth content or things like that, that's also pretty good and pretty helpful.
Yeah, it's important to, like, if you do have like a favorite band or like a really artist you're really into, it is important to just try and support them if you can. Especially if you're sort of getting their music from Spotify and stuff like that, when it's not quite so financially buoyant, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Yeah, definitely.
You've said previously that you believe in giving at least some music away for free. You still feel that that's you know, in this kind of current climate, do you still feel that way?
Oh yeah, I think I don't think I ever won't. With the style of music that I do, and the background that I have, like, you traveling so much, you like learn to make friends with people really quickly, and you learn to establish connections. And one of the most amazing ways to do that is through any sort of participative medium. So be that music, be that art, be that dancing, any sort of interactive type of thing immediately gives people a common shared experience. Like, you have this sort of collective consciousness that's all of a sudden, you know, brought into existence by doing stuff like that together. And folk music does that too. And blues is a type of folk music. Or at least as far as there might be people who disagree with me, I guess, but they can, you know, bye-bye. With folk music, there's an element of participation. There's an element of interaction. There's an element of no one is rejected. No one isn't welcome. If you want to sing the music, if you want to play the instrument, if you want to somehow join in, as long as you're not, you know, a total obnoxious sack of shit, then you're more than welcome to join in. And even if you're a bad singer, if your rhythm isn't great, it doesn't really matter. The point is it's about the experience that's shared together. So that also includes for me giving away my music for free. Now I did that on Bandcamp, but Bandcamp kind of don't really allow you to do that unless you have a special membership. So people still have to pay like something. But I also think that there's something in it for musicians as well that a lot of musicians don't realize, which is just it gets your music out there. It gets people to download it and to listen to it and to, you know, share it with others. Because if it's available for free, and if you can like own it, like if you can have a copy, then you can listen to it more often. But I also think, on the other hand, that the things like streaming services have sort of killed that need for ownership of music. Not a lot of people really own digital music nowadays. If they do, it's, you know, hard copies, whether it's cassettes, CDs, or vinyls, and that kind of stuff. It's very hard to give away for free unless you have a serious piggy bank behind you. But I do still think that music is a gift that makes me happy just as much as other people who are watching and listening, because it's such a transformatory experience.
Just to go back to what you were saying there, VT, about this kind of collective consciousness.
Yeah.
I get the impression that you're very much an artist that lives for that kind of live experience. I've watched a couple of your videos where you played in, I think it would have been small venues in Edinburgh. I think as part of, is it So Far?
Yeah. Yeah. So Far. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think the live experience will be affected going forward off the back of the global pandemic, and what do you make of it all?
I mean, it's going to be a while until gigs can happen at all, right? Yeah. Like, I reckon people are craving for it. Like it is genuinely a missing part of human experience right now. That common experience. Whatever gig people go to, from freaking prehistoric, you know, early man music, whatever, a bunch of dudes hitting bones together and chanting, all the way to the most modern, complicated fuck off jazz, you know, and anything in between. When you're sitting in that room together listening to this person, you're all somehow, there's a little spark that jumps between everyone. And people are missing that, and you can see it by videos, like all sorts of viral videos of, you know, someone puts on this random song in the street and everyone starts dancing or whatever. And you see those things and you're like, this is an extremely important part of our humanity that we're no longer able to exercise at our you know, leisure. So I think people are already sort of fighting back against it, but I don't want to say it like that, because it's not a fight. There were protests recently in the Netherlands, and everyone went out to protest the curfew that the government decided to put into place, which starts at 9 p.m. I'm also part French, and I spent a long time in France, and I spoke to some of my friends in France, and they were like, our curfew is at 6 p.m., dude. What are the Dutch complaining about? And so having a protest about this and getting all together huddled up close and, you know, throwing stones at the police also really isn't a solution. So we're trying, I think we're all collectively trying to find how we can recreate at least, you know, just like a smidge, a semblance of that feeling. And I think that doing live gigs like I've been doing is at least seems to be working to some extent. I've noticed that slowly but surely the audience that I have that are following and listening have been growing. I've also been, you know, making adjustments to get a better sound so that people can get like a more realistic experience when listening. But yeah, I don't think honestly that it's going to be before the end of this year, perfectly realistically, before massive venues, even small venues, anything that's not a private gig, basically, where it's harder for the government to put in regulations, is not going to be possible until the end of the year. And if it is, it's not going to be possible for the little guy, because all of the big bands who have the good bookers, who have the good agents, will have booked all of the slots at any festival. And they're going to be, limited numbers anyway, limited admittance, spaced out somehow. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that smaller venues and smaller artists are really going to have a shot at it before 2022, which is amazingly depressing to say. But yeah. I hope it's not. I hope we get to start before then. But
I think we're all just in shocked silence there.
Quite deflated after that. But you're absolutely right, man. You're right. Unfortunately,
I think sometimes my realism is extremely bleak, which probably is why my music is so dark and eerie in the first place. But yeah, I mean, I have a tendency to really say stuff as it is without any sort of polish. I don't, sorry.
Not at all. I think it's important to be realistic about this kind of thing, not try to be, I mean, it's good to be positive, but not being unrealistic about things is definitely good.
Yeah. I suppose that's probably a good segue of sorts into another question that we've got for EVT. And that is, mental health seems to be a recurring theme in your music. And from things that we've read about you online, on your bio page, for example, you mention issues with domestic violence, homelessness, anxiety, and depression. How have you been keeping yourself safe during these strange and uncertain times? Have you got a regime for keeping your mental health in check?
It's been ups and downs. I'll be perfectly honest. Going out, I often try to go on walks with friends where it's just sort of me and them walking around the city or something, having a coffee, hashing it out about whatever within, safe distance still. So we're not like making out or whatever. But well, I mean, the homelessness is a while back now. Like that was sort of a result of all of the domestic violence in the first place, which mostly came from my parents. And all of it came from my parents. I don't know why I said mostly. But yeah, so that was the homelessness was a result of basically my exile from the parental home, which was no longer very safe. So that's far behind me now. But in terms of mental health, like chronic depression and stuff like that, I think just really trying to get out the house for whatever fucking reason. Like if you have to, I need to go tie my shoelaces. Oh, I'll go tie them outside. Whatever. Like the most what's the word? Oh Christ.
Banal.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay, that's the French word too, and I confused myself there for a second. The most mundane, that's the word I was looking for. Most mundane thing can be an excuse to get out the house, just to go for a walk around the block, do some urban exploring, whatever, and trying to cook a lot at home. I enjoy cooking. So I do a lot of cooking at home, and playing music, even if it's difficult to play it with people. That's obviously not something that is really part of my act, this fantastic as such. So I just, I'll pick up my guitar and just noodle around for an hour or two. That's always how I come up with ideas personally anyway. So I often record the sessions and kind of see what I come up with. And then the weekly sessions, the Church of Fantastic on Thursdays is an amazing breath of fresh air to just interact with the audience and people, getting to see and hear how everyone's doing. Even just a little wave at me is already pretty nice.
Good, man. So just to kind of go back to your traveling, VT, so has your traveling been largely circumstantial, or, I mean, obviously you're in Utrecht just now. Do you think you're settled in Utrecht just now, or do you think you will go on and travel again?
Oh, I'm a serial traveler.
Okay.
So it's definitely going to happen again. My better half is from New Zealand. So that's probably in the cards at some point in the future, however near or far that future may be. But definitely, I mean, for sure. And yes, the traveling was circumstantial. My parents had work in big multinational companies that allowed them or required them to move around. So I moved with, and eventually carried on moving once I had separated from that environment. Mm-hmm. So moving to the UK to study, and then getting very fed up with Oxford and its stuffiness, and moving to Edinburgh for a little more Scottish joviality. And then moving to the Netherlands was really just a necessity. Unfortunately, my partner couldn't get any sort of a visa. And so we had to make a choice as to where we wanted to go. And the Netherlands seemed like first of all, a geographically speaking, quite a decent option, because you can just sort of go anywhere very easily within Europe. And also there's a fair amount of English speakers here. And generally speaking, pretty friendly environment for non-native Dutch speakers or people who don't speak Dutch at all to still be able to find some sort of work. Corona has fucked with that quite a bit. A lot of the people who came here who didn't speak Dutch were in more less how do you say that, qualified jobs, I guess, jobs that require less higher education or no higher education. So those are usually the jobs that have been struck by this sort of stuff. And that includes the bar world in which I was. Mm-hmm. So most, all bars are shut, and if they're doing anything, it's just deliveries and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely going to travel again. And you are right, mostly out of circumstance, a little bit out of desire, and probably all completely because I'm addicted to traveling. Yeah.
Nice. So Hangman is out in a few days' time.
Yes.
And it's got this kind of almost post-apocalyptic Western kind of sound to it. And it reminds me, it's got like a sort of dark cinematic sound that reminds me of From Dusk Till Dawn. It's got that kind of vibe to it.
You're pressing all the right buttons, my friend. Keep going.
And so it's a really cool track. And there's obviously a video to come that goes along with it. You've made videos for the likes of Drag Me to Hell and Ain't No Man with Money, but how big a part does that play in the concept of your music? Is it a kind of afterthought, or is it a more integral part?
So this is a tough one. When I write a song, I come up with, there's almost a bit of a universe that goes with it. So it's never really verbalized as such until it comes time to make a music video. And Drag Me to Hell, the initial video that I made, I pretty much immediately regretted. I think we've taken it down everywhere now. There's a new version of Drag Me to Hell coming out in the new album, which is much more similar to the way that I play it live, and the way I picture it in my head. And shout out to the Animal Farm, who is the studio that I recorded that with in London, and Matt Lepanen, who was the sound engineer and producer on that, is an amazing human being. He's fucking hilarious. And he also, I came into the studio, he heard one song, he was like, right, I know what we're doing. And immediately he had like this million of suggestions. And basically he allowed me to play everything live like I would, because that's how I know the songs. Because for me, playing them without playing them live feels kind of detached, like weird. But back to your question, sorry. So it doesn't come with an idea of a video clip, but it comes with sort of a universe that I conceptualize around it. So Hangman in my head was sort of talking about my troubled past and some of the dumb things I may have done. I didn't like, you know, I'm not a war criminal or some crap, but people that I might have hurt or lack of consideration for friends or whatever. And then thinking about, like trying to put myself in the shoes of someone else altogether. The idea behind Hangman was basically a reformed criminal who somehow has had like an epiphany moment, realized that he's a total asshole and wants to make good for it, and apologize to everyone, and face his fate, which is the Hangman. And so obviously for me, that immediately was Western. I was like, okay, Western. And I heard when I came up with the riff that I'm just going to play it so that we have it in mind. But when I went, oh, that's not tuned. I'll play it on my other guitar. It's a good thing I have two, because I went. And I was like, okay, that sounds, immediately when I had that riff in mind, I thought Ennio Morricone, I thought Link Ray, I thought all of those sort of guys, and that, you know, sort of that type of warble that you get from tape delay or whatever else they use, the slap back and stuff like that. So for me, I heard that and I was like, this has to be some sort of Western in my head. And then when it came time to make a video clip about it, I actually made the video clip myself with the help of my partner. So I directed it, she filmed it, and then I edited everything together. And I took a lot of pieces from old Westerns that are no longer copyrighted, so public domain footage. The main one being Blue Steel, which is a John Wayne film. Worth a watch if you haven't ever seen it. But yeah, so and then I sort of just started creating the universe around it, and the limitations of the current period in time in which we are meant that I had to get a little creative with how I could create the story of the Hangman and the universe, the idea that I had of this song in my head, and put it out there in front of everyone else for them to be able to see. And the easiest way to do that was to use old footage. And then there happens to be a desert in the Netherlands. I know. Very weird. And we went to the desert and we recorded a bunch of footage there of me in this outfit, just standing around and looking like a menacing outlaw or a hangman. And that was that. And then everything just, you know, was sort of a question of how do I edit it together and stuff. But so, in a very, very succinct way to answer your question, there is always a story with it, but it never comes per se as an idea for a video clip. I just ended up verbalizing, if you will, the full concept and the back thought that had gone into the composition of that piece, and somehow managing to create it in a visual sense for people.
Cool. You mentioned, you obviously mentioned sort of Western cinema there, that there's that kind of cinematic sound is present on, you know, some of your other recorded material. You can hear that on Drag to Hell, which has got a bit of a sort of alt rock twist to it as well. And there's elements of blues and soul and sort of sounds of the Underground Railroad especially on Ain't Got Nothing on My Father, which is pretty much a sort of chain gun chant. So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Kind of, what other factors like inside and outside the realms of music and inspire you and influence your songs? I mean, you've talked about this a wee bit already, but more, I suppose I'm more leaning towards the sort of cinematic edge of that.
Cinema indeed is probably one of my biggest influences, actually. I mentioned a little bit, I did a bunch of acting in the past, and every so often I still go back to doing some acting. I've always loved performing on stage, regardless of what kind of performance we're talking about. Any installational, like performance art, any actual theater or cinema or stuff like that, and music, all of these sorts, even dance, any of that kind of stuff. Always, for me, there's that lovely, that wonderful collective experience that I was talking about that you get out of that, and this amazing thrill and the rush of adrenaline, which is maybe like bungee jumping or stuff like that, but there's not much that's comparable to it that I've experienced. And pretty much all of my music somehow has a cinematic approach to it. I don't know that it's intentional, but I have a sort of cinematic approach to life in general. So I guess without meaning to be, it is. A lot of what I think of in music conjures up then images in my head of, so with Drag Me to Hell, I guess I pictured, Drag Me to Hell was a tricky one for me because I sort of wrote it, like most of my songs, I wrote it off the cuff. Like I just sort of picked up a bunch of chords and went, oh, they sound cool together. And figured some lyrics out over it. And then words that seem to somehow match the mood of the chords or of the melody you're playing. And then you develop on that theme. Like you have like a leitmotif, to be an extreme pedant. Sorry. But I think no matter what I do, there's always a cinematic approach to it by default. The clothes that I wear when I perform are always some sort of a performance. And the whole idea when I started Fantastic was really as a performance. I wanted to bring back old blues, the blues of the blues, the chain gang type stuff, the stuff that has taken a space that not even many blues people know and recognize nowadays, because now it's just all sort of people noodling extremely fast on a guitar. And whilst I respect the technical prowess behind that, for me, there's no comparable sensation to that of hearing a bunch of dudes who are miserable in every way, shape, or form, smacking a hammer against a piece of metal and wailing. Like, that is power at its like deepest and darkest, but also at its most touching, because you feel that with them when you're listening to those old recordings. You're there, and you picture that kind of stuff. You picture exactly that. A bunch of guys smacking a gigantic sledgehammer against some spikes that they're driving into the railroad tracks, or cutting the cotton. But yeah, cutting the cotton, picking the cotton. You can see how much cotton picking I've done in my life. But that was the whole point when I started off Fantastic in the first place, was a sort of darker approach to blues, I guess, inspired by Edinburgh in large part, because Edinburgh has such an amazingly eerie past, or at least it's sold to us as that, because that's kind of the marketing techniques of the city. But I love it. I love that Gothicness, and a lot of people who are interested in history and interested in the past have at least more realism, if not slight pessimism, about the future, because they see how it's already happened and you can see it happening again or whatever. So there's a dark element to to an interest in history and to diving back in history. Maybe, I don't know. I'm also just riffing. Feel free to, shut me up or whatever.
Have you heard, just out of interest, have you heard of the band Zealand Ardor?
It was only a question of when, not of if. Yes, I have. I had never heard of them until someone once compared me to them, and I thought, I like their name, and I went and checked them out, and I was like, I get it. I get why people think of me when, or think of them when they hear me, or me when they, whatever. I really like what they do, because obviously they clearly have a much more obvious mixture of metal and blues, albeit black metal rather than hardcore, but it's still, just another child of rock, which is another child of blues. So yes, people often make that comparison. And I'm always flattered because they're an amazing band. And I really like, it makes perfect sense to me as well from on a musical level. Like the scales of black metal are often very minor, intentionally to vehiculate that angst and that sorrow, that tryst. So it makes sense, and I'm always flattered.
Cool.
And I like that.
Yeah, great band. I was just interested to see if you'd heard of them. So is there anything else that you've kind of been listening to recently that you're into, or that has influenced your sound, or not, but just anything that you've been into?
Sure. Let's see. Recently, I've been listening to really all sorts. Today I've been listening to a lot of John Baptiste, who is an American jazz musician. I grew up with blues, rock and roll, and jazz. Those were like my parents' main genres. So I always sort of gravitate back towards them. And in my sets back in Scotland, I used to play like a lot of sort of early big band jazz, like Ella Fitzgerald and oh my God, what's his name? Polish American composer. He wrote Porgy and Bess.
Can't help you. Can't help you, man.
I'm drawing a blank here.
Shit. Okay. Well, anyway, Gershwin. God damn it. I got it. George Gershwin. And all of those kind of guys from that era. So I often gravitate back towards those genres. I've been listening to a lot of Southern Gothic and dark folk and dark country recently, because I'm trying to get to know the other people who are within my genre a little better, now that I've realized that I am in that genre, despite myself, I guess. And there's also a few bands that I really like and that I listen to fairly regularly, like Left Lane Cruiser. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of them. No, they're pretty amazing. They're very similar to my first single, so they're very much hill country blues with an even like C6 Steve, but more energetic. So they have like heavier drum parts and stuff like that. I've been listening to a lot of. I always like bands that are somewhere in the realm of metal, doom, sludge, and blues, and manage to hybridize that. I really love All Them Witches. I never don't listen to All Them Witches. And if you guys don't know them, I recommend them. Black Pistol Fire, I watched a bunch of their sets recently, because they're a two-piece band, and I really like it's like unhinged Chuck Berry, Little Richard rock and roll. Like if they went crazier, I don't know how that would be possible, but if they went crazier than they already did, musically speaking, back then than Black Pistol Fire would be that. And who else? Bunch of smaller artists that do this kind of stuff. There's a guy I really like called Coulter Wall, and he's actually Canadian. Another dude from the US called The Bones of J.R. Jones, and he's a tough one. I wouldn't know how to describe it, but it's sort of dark folk and sort of like electro pop. It's a very, very weird fusion, but it really cool. Who else? Rainwolf. I fucking love Rainwolf. Rainwolf, if you're out there, hit me up. He's amazing, and I listen to him very often as well. Yeah, I think that's about it. If I can think of any more, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah, like just send us stuff over if you think there's stuff you might think that we're interested.
Actually, I have a playlist that has pretty much everyone that's kind of in any way similar to me on Spotify that I created, called 10 a.m. Automatic. And I'm on there, but there's loads of other artists like the ones I mentioned, and Zealand Ardor, and then other artists that sort of inspired me somehow, maybe not by their genre, but by their message or by what they do. Like, everyone has been going on about the Idols, and I am also one of those many who love what they do. And then bands like maybe the Chats, if you guys know them, or Viagra Boys. They're all
Boys, man.
Yeah,
that's one of our favorite bands. We've covered them quite a lot, probably the most we've covered on the podcast, I would say.
Which band?
Viagra Boys.
Oh yeah, they're they're so good, man.
Yeah, great band.
Short shorts. Such a great song. And the fact that you have a saxophone in a punk band makes me very happy. That takes some doing, and they do it well.
I think it's the fact that the saxophone sounds a bit like a caged beast. It always helps.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of saxophones, actually, I recently went on a small binge of a band from New York called Too Many Zoos.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen them, but my girlfriend, her friend, went to see them a couple of years ago in Edinburgh, and
wow.
I've seen there's a really good video of them on I think the New York subway or something, and they're sort of getting on and off of the subway trains. Yeah.
That's a good one. They released one very recently, where they're playing in like a park on the side of the river, like on the riverbank, and they're all sort of in those circles that have been drawn in public parks in the US, to space yourself out between groups, and it's pretty good. So yeah, definitely Too Many Zoos as well.
Cool. I suppose it's the thing that's left to ask is kind of really what's next for VT. There's obviously the album coming. I mean, is there a rough time scale for that? And do you know what will happen? What's next once that's out in the world?
There's not really a time scale. The aim is middle of this year. But it is, we've sort of been putting it on hold and then resuming it because of everything that's going on. So, for example, to be perfectly honest here, I think I would have wanted to release Hangman a little sooner.
Right.
But all sorts of job losses and stuff like that have meant that we were coping with, how do we live on no money first? We're doing all right. But yeah, that became a priority, and we sort of forgot about Hangman for a bit. but I would say the aim is hopefully for around June, if not sooner. We have one more single that we're going to release, which is going to be the new and improved Drag Me to Hell. So rather than a demo, this is going to be the proper thing. And you'll probably notice a little bit of a thread throughout my style of video clip directing. I like black and white. I like heavy grain. I like a lo-fi type of thing. Yeah, so album release, the next single, which is Drag Me to Hell, probably in about 2 months or a month and a half from now. And then after that, I would really like to tour it. Now, whether that's going to be just virtual tours like people have been doing, where they do a KEXP tiny or an NPR tiny desk from home or something like that, or whether it's actually touring somehow, or whether it's me literally just taking a van and going to cities and busking my album, because if that is the only possibility, then I will do it. But that's what we'd like to do in the near future. In the further future, I'm aiming to get my music onto shows and films, because like you said, and thank you for that, the cinematic aspect of my music, I think would work very well in a bunch of shows, basically, that's got anything historical about it or anything sort of eerie about it. And hopefully doing a lot more live shows.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like I'm talking about, for example, with some people just in the Netherlands, of actually just going to their shop that's closed because we're in a lockdown and playing in their shop.
Yeah.
But doing like a live gig in their shop with no one, and then letting the passersby watch, of course, but also recording that and then putting that out for people to see, so that there's an element of, change and cycling it up a little bit as well there, for people to feel like they're in different venues or, whatever.
Yeah, cool. I think I've seen a few kind of smaller venues and, like you say, like record stores and things doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that, because I mean, they're closed anyway, so what's going to happen. And for the musician, it gives you a chance to get still to the ears of the local people who might be going to that coffee store, record shop, venue that's been closed for the past 9 months or whatever. So that it's always an amazing opportunity, because even if you're not playing to people in person, you're still playing within their vicinity. And I think that just purely based on the way that social media tend to work these days, there is going to be people are going to see you first or sooner in their stories on Instagram and what have you, simply because you're in closer proximity to them. So that gives you an element as well as the artist of change and of seeing new scenery, which is one of the fun parts about touring.
See my house, see my garden. I ain't no man with the money. And she said, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, it don't matter, no. Take me by the hand and tell me that you love me. You got me in your vice grip, baby, yeah. Oh, John Henry ain't got nothing on my phone. I said, oh, John Henry ain't got
there anything else you wanted to ask, Grant?
I think we've kind of covered it. Just off the back of the stuff that Van's kind of been speaking about. I was quite interested in, I suppose, the decision to go with Fantastic rather than your birth name, and whether that maybe gave you a bit more creative freedom, or if you felt as if it gave you a bit more creative freedom.
I've always wanted, as I don't know, dumb as this makes me sound, I've always loved the pen names of writers and poets, and you know, David Bowie, and all of these people who have names that could be real. You know, his last name could be Bowie. There have been guys called Bowie, but he's from buttfuck nowhere in Britain, so he's probably not called Bowie. And you have all of these artists, or especially writers and poets from sort of the like 17th, 18th, 19th, 17th and 18th centuries, who used pen names, you know, and in France, a lot of the writers that I grew up reading for school purposes were, you know, were those kind of writers, because the ideas that they were exhibiting were not acceptable, basically, to the direction, the regency of the country. And so to avoid putting themselves at risk, they came up with names like Voltaire. He's the only one who who I'm sure had a pen name out of the sort of Enlightenment writers of that era, of that 17th century. But then you also have that history in music, like I was saying, and in acting. A lot of actors nowadays have these names, which they're pretty plausible, but they're still a little weird, you know. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know that a lot of actors' names are a creation to not have to use their real name, and to sort of have a persona without having so much of a persona. For me, Fantastic was actually a nickname that I kind of created off the back of the whole like goth / scene kid culture type thing way back in the days of MySpace. And I started calling myself Fantastic for, you know, shits and giggles, basically. Like there was no particular reason. There were a lot of people within that community who gave themselves Vaughn or Van names. And I suppose it was a little bit of a mockery of all of their silly names, because calling yourself Von Gore, well, that's very clever. Congratulations. You know, I thought that Fantastic was a little more fun. And it made me think of more of the like cabaret acts of the like 1900s, and how people like, good God, what's her name? Dita Van Teese. Clearly a stage name, but a very good one, considering that she's a pinup and a cabaret dancer. So that's kind of where it came from. And then it just felt right. It also looked amazing when I came up with because I designed the logo myself. So any kind of logos that I was working on for various reasons, also it seemed the most sensible to go with VT because of the strong look of the V and then the cross within it. CF or CAF didn't look as didn't look as fun, basically. So yeah, that's pretty much why it stuck.
Fair enough, man. It makes sense. We've got a mutual friend who had the pleasure of moving in Robert Zimmerman, who is of course Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a long tradition of that type of thing happening. Absolutely. That's great, mate.
Wait, moving him in? How do you mean?
He was part of a removal company. He's working for a removal company.
Oh. In Scotland?
In Scotland. Yeah, I don't know if he still has it, but Bob Dylan at one point had a house, a holiday home Oh, what's it called again? It's near Aviemore. Nethy Bridge? Nethy Bridge.
That's not, is that that's not Edinburgh.
No, that's up in the Cairngorms.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Haven't been to the Cairngorms much, to be perfectly honest. So I'm gonna claim ignorance here, plead the fifth. But yeah, that's yeah. Bob Dylan is an amazing example, actually, of that. But his name is just a little more realistic, I suppose, sounding than Fantastic. Although I have had people who were silly enough to think that was an actual last name, and I both enjoyed that and then derided them heavily for thinking that was ever going to be someone's last name, and that might have been a little cruel of me retrospectively, but it was funny at the time.
So did they address you as Mr. Fantastic or Mr. Tastic? Combination.
No one's ever addressed me as Mr. Fantastic, because then I would have just broken into Shaggy. But it happened once or twice with people that I knew in Oxford and in London, and they just never really questioned it. And when it came up in conversation, eventually I sort of said, "Wait, you genuinely thought that my real last name was Fantastic?" And they were like, they said they did, and so at that point, I thanked them, I laughed, and I told them my real name. So I think I was fairly gentlemanly about the whole thing, but it was still pretty funny.
Yeah, cool.
But unfortunately, no one's ever called me Mr. Fantastic. Sadly.
Here's your dry cleaning, Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's never happened. But I used to get called Chris Fantastic a lot when I did performances, and I don't like that. I'm just Fantastic. The name is, I mean, there's bands that have been Van bands, obviously a big one that we all know of, whose members died recently. But then there's what is that other band that everyone sort of Van Fleet, Greta Van Fleet, you know.
Oh yeah.
There's been a lot of bands that have used the Von or the Van in some way, shape, or form. Towns Van Zandt, but I think that was his actual real name. Living in the Netherlands now, I get a feel for what sounds realistic in Dutch and what doesn't. But yeah, no, it was basically just a little bit of a joke and a pen name and something to mess around with. I've never been so clever as to take my letters and put them in an anagram from my name or something. I'm not that smart. Gotta live with that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've asked pretty much everything we were looking to ask you. I don't know if there's anything you want to ask us while you're here, or anything you want to mention at all.
Merch. I have merch for anyone who's watching. I have merch available through my link in my bio on Instagram, which is a little. It's my logo in orange at the bottom of the page, and I'm cycling out the old merch from Ain't No Man with Money, and cycling in new designs that I've done for Hangman. The sort of basic black on or white on black hoodies and tote bags are staying because I want to have something that everyone can have and that's not too, maybe in your face or whatever. I mean, it does say Fantastic rather largely on the hoodie, but it's not, like a logo printed across that looks like Louis Vuitton or some rubbish like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, the camera's still working. And hopefully at some point that merch will also involve vinyls, which would be amazing, or at the very least cassette tapes if I can't somehow manage to get a good deal on vinyl printing. And cassette tapes are, I think, more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a trinket rather than something that people will actually use and play. But I like the option of being able to sell that to people. And I also really like how much tape espouses the type of sound I have and the type of look I'm going for. Because obviously within the Gothic dark world, like everyone knows that you're not KVLT enough if you or cult enough if you don't have tapes that you make yourself at home, recorded in your shed in the middle of the Norwegian woods or whatever. So there's that element of speaking to the people who are into those dark genres of music, and then there's the element of the sort of era in which I was born, which still had tapes to some extent, and there's just something about tapes for me. I just love the sound of them. There's always that warmth to the way that they sound, and a warble that they have that like it's like a grain. It's like it's an acquired taste, but it always sounds kind of comforting, I think. So yeah. Those were the only things I wanted to mention.
I've got a kind of stupid collection of cassette tapes that I've just been over the last couple of years buying, like you say, sort of novelty, not novelty, but kind of the releases that a lot of bands seem to release things on tape, and I'll just be like, I'll have that. I'm starting to have way too many, but I think you're right. I think your stuff will sound really cool on that kind of, with that sort of old tape sound. I think it'll actually really complement it quite well.
And a lot of the recordings that were done of this type of music in the eras where there was a boom for it did also involve tape, like all of the recording studios back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, they were all tape based. And I guess even the 40s and the 50s probably still, or just at the end of them or whatever. But yeah, I look forward to hearing what I sound like on a tape, because I just recently bought myself an amp that also has an old amp that has the possibility of recording songs onto a tape from an auxiliary. Okay. So I'm gonna do that and see how it works, and if it does, then I'll sell tapes from within my coat pockets or something. Yeah. But let me see. Questions for you guys. How did you find me?
Grant will have to answer that, because
question. I've got a feeling it was through the Facebook algorithm. I think.
Oh, really?
The promo video. Well, I've kind of described it as a promo video where you describe yourself as a cunt fuck. I think that's when that one comes out your mouth rather. I think that came up on my Facebook feed, and it was really just from there.
Okay, nice. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, no, that video got a lot of blowback from less open-minded, shall we say, friends, who, especially the Americans, who are like, "Oh, you said cunt," and obviously, having lived in Scotland for 5 years, cunt is a term of endearment.
Absolutely.
But it can also be obviously, less than endearment. But and also because my partner is from New Zealand, her and I often use that word as well, because the New Zealanders, the Australians, they frequently refer to people as cunts in good and bad ways. So I guess I've just been exposed to that word so much that it's lost a little bit of its zing to it. But yeah, I enjoy. I mean, you got the gist of it, and when I watched that first video of you guys, I really just loved that you understood, because there's always a little bit of sarcasm in everything I do, because I'm a pretty sarcastic guy, I guess. Yeah, so I don't believe in Morgan Freeman. Clearly was a reference to the fact that I'm rather not religious, shall we say. Yeah. Because let's face it, he was probably the best god that anyone has ever done in cinema. Yeah, then the being I can't even remember what I said. Born from a serpent and raised by a goat, or conceived by a serpent and born from a goat, I think was what I used. My parents got a little upset about that one, and then I told them to take a hike. But yeah, I'm glad that hit home with you, because it was really just a little bit of fun, and to get people sort of to know like the humoristic me, which is often what people see in live performances as well. Like I have nothing against deriding myself. Like it's a pastime that I perfected in the UK. But I'd already been exposed to that a lot. In the French have a very sort of self-derisive sense of humor as well. So when people see that, I hope that they can associate with me and realize that it's all a little bit of a joke, and somehow still take my music seriously. I don't know how that works, but that's just what I put out there.
No, it does. I mean, it works very well. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, I mean, how long have you guys been doing this for?
It's just a year now, isn't it, Snedds?
Well, it was like September 2019.
Okay.
Something like that. And we try to do one every month, but it kind of slips quite regularly. So maybe we do one a month, and then one might slip into the next month, and it just depends how busy we are or whatever. But that's the plan. So we've done what is it? Number 14 is the one that's going to go up fairly soon.
Most recent.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. Yeah. I really I enjoy the chats. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. All right. Well, I think that's us pretty much done then. So yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we're excited to hear Hangman and see the video properly on Friday. That'll be awesome.
I can I'll send you guys a sneak preview of it, an avant-premiere of the stuff. I have a link to the unlisted YouTube video. So I'll send that over to you guys. All right. Well, I will go. Thank you so much for having me. This has been pretty fun. I obviously love talking about myself. You know, I'm a musician. But thank you for having me, and thank you for your questions, and thank you for discovering me and enjoying what I do.
Thank you very much for your time, mate. We really appreciate it.
And if I ever in the next few years come back, I'm definitely going to come back to Edinburgh. I don't know why I say if. Let's have a beer.
Yeah.
Or a tea, or if you're teetotal, I respect that too. Yeah. Okay, cool. So some good craft beer then. Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Definitely.
Nice. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to seeing all this in a video.
It's not finished. It's finished.